Our Across the Aisle segment tonight, there's a new darling of the liberal left, Republican Senator Jeff Flake. Following Flake's announcement this week that he would be retiring from the Senate, he made sure to fire some parting shots at President Trump, which Democrats gleefully cheered. Surprisingly, Flake didn't criticize President Trump on policy. He criticized the president for being uncivil. But is this really a legitimate criticism, or does it buy into the myth that politics were ever actually civil? With me now, professor at Johns Hopkins University and Democratic political commentator, Dr. Wendy Osefo. Doctor, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Liz.
All right, Doctor, you had an article about this in The Hill. You talked about Republicans holding President Trump accountable, basically praising, like I said in the introduction, Jeff Flake for his blistering speech that he gave on the Senate here. But I guess I would start out by saying, when have politics, political discourse even in our nation, when has it really ever been civil?
It's not necessarily that they have been civil, but they haven't seeped through the lines of making insults through social media or attacking individuals who may have disabilities or, saying things that are considered sexist to women. And I think that's where Jeff Flake is coming from. I don't really think it's a political issue or it is something that has to be a leaning issue on the left or the right, but rather it's something that says, you know what, you hold the highest office in the land and act accordingly. You reside at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. You don't need to call people losers. You don't need to call people clowns. If a Gold Star family, for instance, thinks that you offended them, simply say you're sorry, move on. Because quite frankly, I am on the left, but there has been some accomplishments that this administration has done, but it has always been covered and muddied by other news. And I think that that's starting to get out of hand. It's time for us to move forward in a bipartisan way and move our country forward without all of this nastiness.
Right, and I think we're pretty much on the same page here, because even though I consider myself to be on the right, clearly anybody who's watched my show knows that I don't agree with every time President Trump picks a fight. Sometimes I think it's funny, sometimes I think it's harmless, sometimes I think it's useful, sometimes I think it's better left unsaid. What I have a problem with is Democrats pretending that this is historic or unprecedented or even unpresidential, when we can talk about a long time ago in our country's history or even recently in our country's history. I mean, Hillary Clinton threw vases at her staff and at her husband when he was president. Barack Obama said behind closed doors he curses like a sailor. President Bush was kind of famously hot-headed. Alexander Hamilton, far back in our history, I mean, he was killed in a duel. I think the difference isn't necessarily the tone of the discourse, it's social media and the media wanting to constantly cover the salaciousness of what's being said.
Well, I think it's bits and parts, right? Because it is social media with everything. Everything is heightened when you have a platform that in 140 characters, the world hears what you're saying. But I also think it's the acts as well, right? We cannot negate that Access Hollywood tape. That's not something that we have seen in our history or heard in our history. I mean, we have young children who are talking about that. When you have, again, a Gold Star family and you're saying, no, that's not what I said. Or again, when you're talking and people say you made fun of a disabled reporter. Those are things that cross the line of politics, and they're really uncivil, and we have to question it. You cannot even, again, if this was a Democratic president, I think that's what Flake made mention of, that was really salient, and we cannot, forget that.
Right.
As he said, if this was happening with Democrats, would we stay silent? And if the answer is no,
the answer to that is yes.
We have to question it.
The answer to that is yes. And
yes,
it is. Yes, it is. I can give examples because I agree with you. I mean, there's no defending the Access Hollywood tape. At the time it came out, I condemned it just like I'm not sure anyone defended it. I condemned it like everyone else did. It was disgusting. It was sexist, blah, blah, blah. We all know the story there. But Democrats were silent when Bill Clinton sexually assaulted and had allegations of rape while he was president and governor of Arkansas. I'm not trying to relitigate that. I'm just saying this illustrates the double standard. Hillary Clinton allegedly made fun of disabled children at the White House Easter egg roll when Bill Clinton was president. She said horrible things. She said horrible things about young black people years ago. She's made fun of stay-at-home moms. I mean, this kind of discourse in our politics, in our history, it does exist. It's just existed behind closed doors. And I guess the problem I had mostly with your article was that it was saying the only way Republicans can be good is if they turn into Democrats.
No, the only way Republicans can salvage their reputation is if they call out Trump when he needs to be called out. And even though you may have been able to sit here and say there are things that the president has done that is not good, you can say that also not all Republicans have done that. There have been Republicans that say, you know what, he's one of those presidents that he wants to speak to the American people directly and he should use Twitter. Well, that's not true. We have to be able to call him out. And that is the operative word. You're able to say when he's right and when he's wrong. And there are not enough Republicans who are doing that. We cannot have blind support of any president. That is what makes our republic so amazing, is the ability to speak against our elected officials when we feel as though they are erring. And that's what's missing today in American politics.
Well, and I guess that's the part I don't see. There are certainly individuals, and this is true on both sides of the aisle. I mean, it's as true for people who are fans of Hillary Clinton, people who are fans of Donald Trump, who can't criticize. I'm certainly not one of those people. I haven't spoken to anybody who is one of those people, but I guess conflating the idea that Jeff Flake is being brave, that he has the courage to stand up and criticize President Trump when no one else will, that's not, I mean, that's fake news. That's a false narrative. He's resigning his seat, or he's not going to run for re-election because he betrayed his voters. He ran as a conservative and then he didn't vote in the Senate as the conservative that he was in the House. That's why he stood on the floor of the Senate and said the things that he did, because he had nothing to lose. There's no courage in doing that.
Actually, I don't think that's why he did that. I actually think that the Republican Party right now is at a civil war. It's at a civil war with those conservatives who have those ideologies that, are traditional, whether it's, making sure that we have free trade, limited government, and pro-immigration. And then you have the Trump Republicans. And that's what's going on. We see Bannon doing it, trying to remove people from the establishment. And I think that's where Flake and Crocker as well, they are both in this influx where they're saying, you know what, if we are having people who are fighting against us within our own party, then we might as well just go ahead and leave our hats at the door, because we're not going to win. So that's actually what's going on there, is this civil war that's going on.
No, and I don't think so. I don't think so. I think he's making a fuss because he voted very conservatively in the House. Then he ran for Senate and he voted very moderately. I mean, he voted against defunding Obamacare. He voted to fund Obama's amnesty. I mean, he voted on a lot of different things that the voters in his district didn't consider to be conservative. That's why they don't want to elect him again. That's why he's leaving it. It has nothing to do with getting on board with Trump's agenda, because he's voted, since President Trump took office, he's voted policy-wise 80% of the time with President Trump. That completely debunks his narrative that he can't get on board with the president.
Well, I don't think it debunks it, because the president even said himself that the reason why you're leaving is because, people aren't going to vote for you, but it's not because he's quote unquote done anything wrong or nefarious. It's really because there is a civil war. I mean, there's facts to say that, but I don't think that by any means, diminishes what he's saying, when he stood on that Senate floor and delivered in less than 6 minutes a blistering account of the state of politics in America and the state of the Trump administration. He needs to be held accountable. Trump is doing things that is taking not just his party, but quite frankly, our entire political establishment as it stands right now down the aisle. And we don't want to get to a path where we cannot correct course here. We still have other individuals who are going to come and be president, and we want to make sure that we don't lower the bar for anyone who lays their head at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and they all have to be held accountable.
Well, perhaps I can get on board with that, as long as we keep it to exactly what you said. We hold them all accountable, no double standards, and that is not what we've seen from Democrats in the past. Dr. Osefo, we're out of time. Thanks so much for being here today.